By agreement, we are going to skip opening statements of the chair and ranking member until such time as Senator Hirono arrives. But we will welcome our three distinguished panelists today. Honorable James F. Gertz, Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition, Vice Admiral William R. Mers, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Warfare Systems, and Lieutenant General David H. Berger, Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps for Combat Development and Integration. So, gentlemen, I understand you've drawn straws, and one of you gets to make an opening statement. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, we'll let you proceed, and then we'll take questions on a 5-minute basis. And when my distinguished ranking member arrives, we may interject some opening statements for the record. You're recognized, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Hirono, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thanks for the opportunity to appear before you here today to update you on the Department of the Navy shipbuilding plan. I'm joined today with Admiral Bill Mers, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Warfare Systems, and Lieutenant General Dave Berger, Deputy Commandant for Combat Systems Development and Integration. With your permission, I'd like to provide a few brief remarks for the three of us and then submit our formal statement for the record. We'd like to first thank Congress for the timely enactment of the fiscal year 2019 DoD budget. On-time enactment of the authorization or appropriation for FY 2019 without a continuing resolution provides the predictability and stability in funding that's critical as we build the Navy the nation needs in support of the National Defense Strategy. Timely passage of this budget has enabled us to accelerate contract awards, increase our acquisition efficiency, and deliver for our sailors and Marines. Additionally, your continuing support of our Maritime Accelerated Acquisition programs has provided much-needed agility within the budget cycle. Through day-to-day interactions with the committees, we're able to quickly pursue near-term capability gaps against emerging threats. The strategic environment continues to be more dynamic, increasing in its uncertainty and sophistication. The proliferation of modern technologies, along with the erosion of the competitive advantage in areas where we have long enjoyed relative superiority, can test our ability to influence and create a great range of challenges for a globally responsive force. In order to retain and expand our competitive advantage, it's imperative we continuously adapt to the emerging security environment and do so with a sense of urgency. This requires the right balance of readiness, capability, and capacity, as well as budget stability and predictability. It requires a Navy of at least 355 ships. The Navy's 30-year shipbuilding plan for fiscal year 2019 provides the framework to achieve this 355-ship Navy at a steady, sustainable, and affordable rate. Our current plan puts the Navy on path to 327 ships by FY 2023 and 355 ships by 2034. Executing this plan relies on sufficient and stable funding. It also requires we continue to work to improve and reform our business processes, as well as ensure we maintain a robust industrial base. Our shipbuilding industrial base and supporting vendor base continues to be a unique national security imperative that must be properly managed and protected. We value our partnership with Congress, and together we can assure that our Navy and Marine Corps teams operating around the world continue to provide effective deterrence as instruments of peace, or if necessary, to deliver superior naval power to protect those who are threatened. We thank you for the strong support this subcommittee. We look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you very much, and I'll just direct questions to the panel, and the one who feels best suited to answer step forward. Encouraging news on the requirement, the statutory requirement, according to the Ships Act, which is the unanimous position of this subcommittee and also the law of the land signed by the President of the United States. 327 by the year 2023, 355, another 11 years after that. How will how optimal will that mix be, Mr. Secretary, at those two stages?
Sir, I think, as we talked about in the springtime, we were able to accelerate the plan to 2034 by extending the life of a number of our destroyers. That's not the optimal mix per se. I'll turn it over to Admiral Mers in terms of where he sees a little bit of an imbalance, but it's certainly a workable mix that would allow us to execute the national defense strategy. Bill, if you want to jump in.
Yes, sir. First of all, Senator, I'd like to echo Secretary Gertz's appreciation on the enactment of the 19 bill. It just makes every process significantly more efficient.
It was a bipartisan achievement, and I'm proud to have been part of this team.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Regarding the mix, we've been long-time defenders of the proper mix to 355. That 355 is a derived number. We determine what types of ships we need and what numbers, add them all up, and we get the 355 or higher, depending on what study you rally around. When we extended the life of the DDG-51 to 45 years, immediately shifted the shipbuilding plan left about 20 years as far as total numbers, but in the incorrect mix. However, if you're going to have an incorrect mix, it's nice to have too many destroyers while we're balancing out the remainder of the fleet. So we determined that imbalance is less of a risk, more of an imbalance in the correct direction.
Good point.
But we still need to fill in the rest of the fleet, and holding the fort down with more DDGs is a sound way forward.
Well, let me ask you about some assumptions that might change the plan and get us there faster. Specifically, what would happen if no service life extensions? Maintained overall shipbuilding funding levels at the fiscal year 2035 level after we get finished with the Columbia-class procurement. That'd be sweet, wouldn't it? Receive supplemental funding for the Columbia program outside the normal account in FY 21 through 35, or use the available shipyard capacity identified in the 30-year shipbuilding plan.
Sir, I think all those would be instruments of change to move that to the left. When we built the shipbuilding plan, we built a framework of what a steady, sustainable rate would be, and then where we had opportunities to accelerate should funding become available, whether that's in destroyers or in submarines or in some of the other classes. So those opportunities exist. Depending on the levels of those assumptions you spoke of there's certainly opportunity to move that plan to the left.
Okay,
I think it is important, though, sir, and I think both my colleagues would share that we're balanced in doing that. And so as we look forward to our plan, we got to make sure we include a balanced force that we can sustain and keep ready, and that's part of the calculus as we move forward as well.
Okay, according to statute, we're supposed to revert back to the BCA caps. I view that as unthinkable and would be irresponsible on the part of this Congress. But what would happen if we did that, or how might a flat or declining defense budget affect the shipbuilding account? What would that do to our national defense readiness?
Sir, I think our job for the
You have 12 seconds, sir.
Yes, sir. Our job for the Department of Navy is, create the best balanced force mix we can, given the funding available. So I won't hypothesize what that might look like in those different budget scenarios, other than to say, we would try and balance with the funding available. Obviously, at the BCA level, that significant a cut would be difficult to imagine us executing the current plan under BCA caps.
Difficult to imagine, yes.
Sir, if I can just add on to that, actually two pieces. Your previous question about service life extensions, we do that we review every ship for service life extensions and extend what we can. But those last 2 points you made I think are absolutely fundamental to sustaining the shipbuilding plan. That is a steady funding profile and to figuring out an alternate solution to the Columbia funding profile, which we've already identified in the shipbuilding plan, and that's work to be done. Not quite a panic yet, but it's on the horizon. We're going to have to deal with that. As far as the BCA, there would be an immediate impact as soon as that went in, depending on how it lasts. I think we could go from immediate to devastating impact on the program.
Thank you very much. Senator Shaheen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Secretary Gertz, I'm glad that Admiral Merz was more direct about his response to that question. And I would say to you all that this is an imminent possibility, and unless Congress is very clear about what the impact is going to be, I think it makes it harder to make a decision. So I hope that you will not be as diplomatic as you were in your response to that question, and you will be very direct and say, this is what the impact is going to be, because I think we need to hear that in order to make the best decision possible.
Absolutely. Will do, ma'am.
Secretary Gertz, as we all know, the goal of the 355-ship Navy came as the result of the QDR in 2014. Now, all of us here on the subcommittee were in Halifax a couple of weeks ago for the Halifax Security Forum, and we heard Admiral Davidson, who's the commander of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, say that we need a bigger Navy. And he said that the Chinese fleet continues to grow, and I quote, "the capacity concern is going to become greater in years to come." So, given that the 355-ship Navy was the result of a study in 2014, are we still comfortable that that number of ships is adequate to address the growing threat from China and Russia, for that matter, the great power competition that we're now facing?
Yes, ma'am, I'll take that one. So the 2016 FSA was a composite of the O plans, the threat vectors, and then what are the phases of warfare we have to deal with across those threat vectors. No matter what study you looked at, they all said we need to be bigger, and we've endeavored on a path to get bigger. 355, I think, is a minimum. We have started the process on the next force structure assessment. It's typically about a year-long process when we get the new combatant commanders in place, the adjustment to the O plans and how that affects the component commands, in our case the Navy component commands. And then we put together the force structure assessment, and then we have typically a commission of external assessors to look at that, and then we red team it, and then when we put it out. A single force structure assessment typically will influence 2 or 3 budget cycles, which is actually a pace that is very aligned with how quickly we can even adjust a shipbuilding plan and the force structure. So it typically works out well for us. We have seen nothing from the combatant commanders to date or Secretary Mattis's National Defense Strategy that would give us any indication that we're going to be coming off that 355 ship in composition or in total numbers.
Thank you. Secretary Gertz, you testified before the subcommittee in April about the Navy's initiatives to work with small business. I come from a state where small business is the foundation of our economy. We heard recently from Air Force Secretary Wilson about the Air Force's Blue Shift initiative to try and engage small businesses in the needs of the Air Force in the future. Is there anything similar that the Navy is doing with small business?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. And coming off of 2018, it was one of the largest years on record for the Navy in terms of small business awards. We're a couple % above our goals, with over $15 billion going directly to small businesses. So they are key to our future, absolutely. So yes, I'm coordinating directly with Dr. Roper and taking advantage of any opportunity there. The Navy still is kind of top performer of all the services on SBIR Phase 3 opportunities, where we turn those initial small business awards into larger awards. And then this last year, we've awarded several major ship construction projects directly to small businesses on the coast. So sometimes I think it gets thought of only from a technology standpoint, and we're having small business. They're constructing ships for us and doing an outstanding job. They will be a key to our future.
That's great. I appreciate hearing that. Can you tell us how we can ensure that small businesses in our states are aware of what's going on and how to be engaged in those proposals when they come out?
Absolutely. So I've assigned the deputy program manager for all of our programs as a small business advocate. And so one thing to recommend to them is for any of the programs that they're interested in, contact the program manager. That way they've got somebody inside the program that's their advocate, as well as any of our small business offices we have all around the Navy.
Great. We will follow up. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me just follow up, Admiral Mers, on Senator Shaheen's first line of questioning. I would call to everyone's attention Secretary Gert's opening statement. The emerging threats have not diminished in the last 2 years, have they, Admiral? Do you think they've gotten worse?
Exactly right, sir.
The challenges, I think his statement was that they're more dynamic, and that you certainly agree with that. So if anything, there'd be a higher requirement. Now this 355, you mentioned, and I appreciate you saying this, this is the minimum that we need. A 355 ship fleet is not some best case ideal that we'd like to achieve if everything goes well. Am I correct there?
Yes, sir.
So what do you, I mean, actually, the admirals and generals came back to us with 655, didn't they?
Yes, sir. That was one of the numbers that was evaluated.
And it was, of course, resource challenged, and we have to make all the numbers come out. We don't have unlimited funds. But the 355 is the minimum under a scenario where things were dangerous, but actually less dangerous than they are right now. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. Absolutely correct. When we constructed the shipbuilding plan, first and foremost, we set a steady build rate that would continue to grow the Navy over time at an affordable rate and to protect the industrial base. We put tremendous effort in identifying the extra capacity in the shipyards that we could increase the pace to 355. And that was independent of the service life extensions that we did with not just the DDG 51s, but we're also looking at up to 7 Los Angeles-class submarines that we're going to endeavor to do service life extensions on. The fact is, it's going to take us decades to get there, and the higher the pace, the steeper the ramp, the better. We are also endeavoring to design ships that can take much better advantage of things we can control on a shorter timeline, like the capabilities we put on these ships. The way we've been explaining it is, the CONOPS, the tactics on how the commander employs the ships, that can change in hours, days, weeks. The capabilities, months and years to develop ships, years and decades to put together. So we're endeavoring to design these ships to take on these capabilities under a much shorter timeline to affect these CONOPS. So it's all tied together. 355 is the minimum to get there. The sooner we get there, the better.
And I would just echo also Secretary Gertz, what Senator Shaheen said. We don't want you to be alarmist. We don't want you to exaggerate and wave your arms. You're relaxed about your job, and you're going to do what you can with what we give you. But do tell us the facts, and let's be honest with the American people about how far behind we've gotten. So thank you very much. And
yes, sir. Just one other piece on the Budget Control Act. Obviously, the number is devastating in itself. The other piece that's particularly challenging for shipbuilding is every ships are line item appropriated, and those cuts come down as a equal share to every appropriation. And so not only is the number itself a drastic reduction, which will cause great disruption, how that number will get laid across the budget, should we get in that condition, will be devastating to the way we have funded and constructed our shipbuilding program. So there's a little bit of a double whammy in there that will cause a complete disruption of the program should that path come to us.
And I think members of the committee, we're actually working on the 2020 budget even as we speak. So The future is imminent. Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to follow up on what the chairman was suggesting here. Admiral Mertz, in September, the commander of the U.S. naval forces in Europe said, and I quote, "I think Russian submarines today are perhaps some of the most silent and lethal in the world," unquote. And that the caliber missiles that Russia has deployed from coastal defense systems, aircraft, and submarines have, and once again I quote, "shown the ability to reach pretty much all the capitals in Europe from any of the bodies of water that surround Europe." How is this type of Russian activity factoring into Navy budgeting and posture decisions?
Yes, sir. So the specific capabilities of Russia, we keep a very close eye on. And Admiral Fogel, being a submariner, is uniquely attuned to the undersea capabilities. Matter of fact, he spent much of his life underwater working on this problem. Unfortunately, I can't really speak in this forum of the specific capabilities we're concerned about and what we're doing about it, but I'm happy to come and brief you in a separate forum on how that goes. But
that's fine, but I think what's important here is that there is a need for additional resources, and that our peer adversaries are not sitting still. They are developing their systems. They're continuing to move with new technologies. And what this open session is an opportunity to do is to highlight our need to continue to move forward with those new technologies. And it's really difficult to be able to share with the American public unless you're prepared to lay out in some pretty clear terms just how serious the threats are from our near-peer competitors. I'm going to ask on the Russian side, and then we're going to go into China. But on the Russian side, can you visit a little bit about how serious this is, or is this just day-to-day operations?
So the capabilities Russia brings is very serious. They're tremendous engineers. We've been sparring with them for quite a long time, as we say, our old Cold War adversaries. The technologies they develop are often leading in whatever field they decided to.
So I'm going to lead you down the road a little bit. So the 1990s technology that we have today, are they capable of handling the technologies that are being deployed today by the Soviet Union with regard to submarine warfare?
So are we capable of handling the 90s technology that Russia has fielded?
Or the ones that they're fielding today with our 1990s technologies?
Sir, I really can't get into how we're going to deal with the Russian capabilities from a U.S. capability standpoint. We'll have to take that to a different forum.
Okay. How about on China? And I'm going to ask this of both Secretary Gertz and you, Admiral Mertz. The former Indo-Pacific commander has testified that only half his requirement for attack submarines in the Pacific theater was being met. This challenge will only grow worse in the 2020s as attack submarines retire at a faster rate than they're planned to be built. How is the Navy planning to mitigate the attack submarine shortfall in the 2020s? And what are you doing right now to make sure that you don't have additional attack submarines sitting at dry dock, such as what we had with the Boise and several others as well?
Yes, sir. I think if you asked Admiral Mertz and I, that is probably the most looming shortfall ahead of us in terms of capability is in attack subs. And so I think we're attacking that in several different courses of action. One is ramping up the Virginia production to 2, potentially more than 2 down the road, submarines per year. And getting those new submarines out into the fleet. The second area is where can we do some service life extensions. Some of our existing submarines using the 7 cores we have available to extend the life of some of our existing submarines and mitigate some of the bathtub that's coming up. Right, and then the third piece is attacking availability, and so that we have every submarine as available and in the fight as we can.
How many submarines do you have in dry dock right now waiting to get in? How many of them are tied up at dock waiting to get into dry dock today?
I'll have to get you the exact number on that. What I'd say is where we're looking is both how do we improve performance in the public shipyards. So that's part of our shipyard optimization plan. And then how do we move work and leverage the private capability so that we don't have ships waiting to get into the public yards. Currently, we have 4 ships in the private submarine yards doing their availability repairs. We're going to contract for an additional 2 coming out. And so the NAVSEA commander and I are looking very closely at the future throughput we need both in the public yards and in the private yards to balance that out, so we don't get back into the state where we have submarines waiting for years to get into the yard.
Just, Mr. Chairman, I just think the point being that it's pretty tough to ask the private boat yards to be able to be ready to go, not knowing whether or not we're going to have the resources available to fund those systems on a timely basis. And that's part of the reason for the discussion today is not only looking at the technologies necessary, but just to maintain the existing fleet on our way to a 355, we've got to have consistent funding in the mix that you can count on in order to make those long-term contractual obligations with the folks who actually do the repair work.
Absolutely, sir. The steady and predictable funding is the key. We've got to convert that into deliberate plans with enough lead time so that those private yards are ready and equipped to take that input as we come in. When I look at the future, I think there's always going to be a future of both public and private submarine maintenance that makes sense from having a balanced skill set that gives us flexible options depending on the repairs we need to do, and it attacks this throughput so that we maximize the availability of every asset we have.
I'll ask for the record the numbers that you've got right now that are waiting to get into dry dock that you can get back to me on.
Absolutely,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank
Senator,
you, Mr.
I'd like to follow up just with
Yes,
one comment on your larger question of the total number of submarines and what are we doing to get there. I think this is just a tremendous case study and a lesson for everybody that if you walk away from your industrial base, there is no graceful recovery. There is nothing we can do to minimize the trough other than selectively picking years that we can potentially build a third submarine per year, and even that will not fill in that trough. We're going to extend submarines the best we can, but we are not going to reach 66 submarines till the very end of this shipbuilding plan. And it's simply a result of delivering, the number's close, I think it's 2 submarines in the 90s. And that's an industrial base that's just not sustainable. And this is the long-term impact.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the witnesses for being here today and for your service. I have questions about 4 kind of discrete issues, and I'll just address, and whoever can deal with them, please do. First, Secretary Gertz, your opening statement, written statement, talked about the possibility of the 2 CVN buy, and the quote was, Navy's continuing to negotiate the significant savings associated with the 2 CVN buy should the Department choose to pursue the option. The NDAA that we passed requires the Secretary of Defense to certify to the Defense Committees not later than 30 days before entry into a contract if you decide to go the 2 buy route. Can you give me a status report on those discussions? Are we likely to have some certification of that kind soon, or just give me the status?
Yes, sir. Since we spoke last, we've been working closely with the shipyard and negotiating what savings would look like should we go into a 2-carrier condition. We think those savings will be better than the $2.5 billion number that I quoted, I think, at the last time we spoke. We are as you know, the 20 budget process right now, so we have not made a final decision on whether to pursue that or not. I would expect that decision sometime by the end of this calendar year, and obviously then we would have to, should we go down that path, the SecDef would certify that and submit that to Congress per the NDAA.
Right.
What's your drop-dead date on having to make that decision?
Sir, I'm not sure it's a drop-dead date per se. We're aiming to have that decision by the end of the calendar year. If that decision were to move out much longer than the calendar year, the savings achievable will start to erode, given that we currently have CVN 80 on contract.
A second issue, and it deals with the submarine supply base, Emery, you were talking about. There was $450 million in the FY18 and 19 NDAAs and appropriations for submarine supplier base expansion. We've heard from some suppliers that the Navy has yet to release any of those funds. I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's what we've heard. Is that the case? And if so, can you tell us what you're likely to do to release those funds and start to do the
I'm going to
basics?
pass that to Secretary Gertz.
Sir, let me take that one for the record. I believe we have obligated all the FY18 funding in there, but let me take that for the record and get you a full accounting of that actual obligations to date, and then for the things we haven't obligated, both the timing and where we plan to obligate those.
We'll submit that for the record. There have been challenges with the advanced weapons elevators on the CVN. Some of the technical difficulties seem similar to those that were experienced earlier on both the launch and arresting systems. I think that the Navy put together independent review teams to tackle those issues and provide solutions. Are we at a point where that may be needed on the weapons elevators, or are we in a position where we think the progress on the weapons elevators is satisfactory?
Yes, sir. So there are 11 weapons elevators. Each one of them we have to produce, test, and then certify. The first 2 of those have been produced. The first one's been through test and certification. Second one's about 94% through test. We're making progress to get through all the elevators during this availability. I am likely to do an independent review team, not on the immediate construction for CVN 78, but looking at the longer term sustainability, resilience, reliability to make sure we're in a position to support those elevators for the long term, that we've got all the training, all the reliability built into those. We've done some mini independent reviews for the 78 elevator design as they are. So we won't do one on the current efforts on 78. We've got a dedicated team working our way through those issues.
And is your timing on that testing and certification on 78, you have this 12-month period where you're testing, you think you'll get through the testing and certification of all the 11 elevators in a year-long period?
My current assessments will get through all the production and much of the testing. We may have some of the certification issues to go. I'm watching that very closely, and we'll keep you and your staff informed on progress there.
Excellent. This last one is it's kind of a minor and technical thing, and yet it may portend a larger problem. We've got a company in Virginia called Collins Machine Works. They're in Portsmouth, and they have raised an issue that I think is kind of an interesting one, and the committee has become aware of this. There's an issue affecting production of propeller shafts for the Virginia-class sub. This is a contractor that has used a commercial off-the-shelf product for which there was no military specification in terms of welding flux. The subcontractor then changed the mixture of the welding flux. Turns out that it now doesn't really meet the requirements, and I think Collins has let the Navy know about this. I'm assuming we sort of promote use of off-the-shelf technologies when we can, and yet in this instance there wasn't a mil spec for the off-the-shelf technology, and so there was a change of it by the supplier that ended up affecting the production of the propeller shafts for the CVN. Is that just kind of a normal kind of a thing that you work through as it comes up, or is it portend something larger about use of off-the-shelf commercial products?
I'm not sure it portends to a specific issue with commercial off-the-shelf products. I think what it does show us is how fragile our supplier base is, and how if you have an issue with one supplier, it can cause larger programmatic issues. So, you know, one of the things that was in the industrial base report we did as part of the executive order, some of the work we're doing with the funding that this committee has provided is really looking at the fragility of that supplier base. How do we bolster that up? Where do we have single source suppliers that we can bring on, bring additional sources on to give us flexibility? One, so we aren't caught with only one supplier in certain conditions. Two, so we can grow at the production rate we need to grow at.
I think that the point, Mr. Chair, just about the fragility of the supply base, if you have a supplier and they just change the mixture on the welding flux, and then that leads to inadequate delivery of propellers for the subs, which then means the subs can't do what they're supposed to do. I mean, it's pretty fragile when the changing of the mixture on welding flux ends up potentially blocking your ability to get propellers. So absolutely. I think using the funds that I asked about earlier to expand the submarine supply base is important to make sure that we're not leaning too heavily on something that's as fragile as you point out.
Absolutely, sir.
The $450 billion that you asked about earlier.
Yeah, I think that can be used to address some of these challenges, I think.
And you agree with that?
Yeah, yes, sir. We certainly agree. I mean, we've done a lot of work looking at common suppliers across our nuclear aircraft carriers and submarine programs, and actually the support of the committee here, both making sure that the suppliers are ready to go and that we can take advantage of doing common buys across those programs so that supplier sees a more steady stream of planned and predictable work. It's challenging enough at the prime level when programs start and stop and move around. It gets really challenging in the second, third, and fourth level suppliers to be able to deal with changing profiles and changing requirements. And so the efforts the committee has done here to help us in that regard will pay off big as we continue along on these important programs.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Secretary, you answered Senator Kane's question about the troubling issue of the advanced weapons elevators. Let's get your thoughts on three others that are significant risks in the Ford class. The electromagnetic aircraft launching system, the advanced arresting gear, and the dual band radar. How we come in on those?
Sir, I would say of all of the technologies on the CVN 78, of which there were many, we proved out on this lead ship. The weapons elevator is the one that's the last one for us to get tied up and work our way through. I think we've got a path there on both the EMALS program, both the launcher and the arresting gear. We've had over 747, both catapults and traps on the CVN 78 during its 81 days.
I hope the numbers were equal of the launches and the.
Yeah, they were.
Yeah, okay.
They were, sure.
Relatively, yeah.
Relatively, 24,000 cycle events of that equipment on our shore-based test site there. So we're feeling pretty confident on both of those systems, both on the catapults and the arresting gear there. Dual band radar, again, making good progress there. Don't see any major technical issues with that system as well. And then as we look towards CVN 79, we're seeing fairly drastic reductions in labor hours. HI has proven that once we get this design nailed down, their ability to be efficient in producing those, we're seeing 16% less production labor hours on the second carrier in that class than the first one. And so as we get that design locked down, the efficiencies that we expected to see are bearing out in the production phase.
Are we going to be glad we went with the EMALS and advanced arresting gear?
Yes, sir. I mean, the challenge with the legacy systems, one are, parts and being able to produce those, but for the carriers of the future to be able to launch everything from fairly heavy fighter craft and some of the others to very light systems like the MQ-25, you need these systems to have the range of capability you need to launch that different kind of air wing of the future. And so while, yes, there's certainly been technical challenges we've had to work through, it really opens up our ability to operate a wider variety of aircraft from the deck, both manned and unmanned, which I think is going to be critical to those carrier effective operations as we look to the future.
Thank you. Let's talk about frigates. We're supposed to do a competitive award in 2020. Please update the subcommittee on the Navy's acquisition strategy for the new frigate. Is the intent still to award the contract based on full and open competition?
Sir, absolutely. We're marching right along the schedule that we briefed earlier. And recently, the CNO and I both validated the frigate requirements. So we've got those requirements now locked down. That was per the schedule we have. We're drafting the RFP, which we will request for proposal, which we'll get out to industry here this spring. That will give us time to get additional feedback from them. We've been interacting with them throughout this whole design process as we've looked at all the requirements to make sure the requirements were affordable. That draft RFP will then lead to an RFP we plan to release at the end of this fiscal year, which will give us a full year then to award that competitive contract, full and open competition for the frigate program. So that program remains on track, and I'm confident we will execute that to plan.
Now, on the LCS, the Congressional Research Service noted that the Navy did not perform a formal, rigorous analysis to determine the right approach to addressing a set of capability gaps and mission needs with regard to the LCS. How are we going to keep from repeating this experience with the new frigate? And do you challenge the CRS in their conclusion?
Go ahead, Bill.
Sir, I'll take that one. So regarding the CRS on the LCS, no, we don't challenge it. We took some lumps on the LCS. We learned a lot. I am personally a fan of that ship and that ship class. I think it has tremendous utility, and we'll come through all that. I will tell you a lot of the lessons learned we rolled into the frigate process. The frigate process is a new process for us. We brought industry in early to discuss how these requirements may play out, using their expertise to really discover the art of possible before we set the requirements. Created some anxiety up front, a lot of give and take. I think in the end, industry's happy. We are getting, at least all the vectors are, a much more lethal ship for the price point. And simply because instead of just levying requirements on industry, we're working with them as partners ahead of the requirements process. So I think all that is a much healthier approach to avoid some of the pitfalls we had with some of the earlier classes.
Can you describe the Navy's vision for the future surface combatant force, Admiral? To what extent does extending the service life of the Arleigh Burke class destroyers affect the timeline for procuring the next large surface combatant?
Yes, sir. I touched on that a little bit earlier when I was talking about this spectrum of things we can influence over time. And the piece about the large surface combatant, about making it as an adaptable platform as we can to take advantage of these much more quickly churning capabilities that we're going to have to field, and really adapt it in the time frame of one maintenance cycle, not a dry dock, not an overhaul, but we can do these pier side, we can outfit these ships and move them out. The Arleigh Burke is a fantastic ship. Matter of fact, the Flight 3 that we're delivering soon is going to be pretty much the most capable warship on the seas. The problem with the Arleigh Burke is she's full. We really don't have much room to expand or modernize her much beyond her current platform. Matter of fact, she is capable to the point now that the next large surface combatant is probably going to pick up right where we left off with the Arleigh Burke. So there is this very nice evolution between the two ships, where we're testing out the technology on the Arleigh Burke, the adaptability concept of the next generation large surface combatant. I think we're going to be in a much better position to be a lot more agile, both on the industry side and on the warfighting side with this new.
What would be the time frame, generally speaking, of this next generation?
It's a two-phased approach. The first one, early 20s, 23, 24, and then a follow-on version in the late 20s. Really dependent on how this first phase goes.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Earlier today, the full Armed Services Committee heard from the National Defense Strategy Commission on their report about the NDS. And one of the comments that Admiral Ruff had made was that it had taken 15 months to get the John McCain back into operation. And it was in the context of suggesting that we can't afford to have that kind of an asset down for that long a period of time. And, you know, if we look at history, at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard during the 5-year span of World War II, they produced over 70 submarines. 4 of them were launched on one day in 1944. So I appreciate that we're in a totally different time and technology is different. But what are we going to do about that concern that we can't have that major an asset down for that period of time and expect to be competitive?
Yes, ma'am. I think I agree with the concern that we've got to be able to not only have the assets to start the fight or withstand the first day of the fight, but withstand the sustained fight. Part of what we're looking at is we relook at both our public shipyards and how we do private repairs, is to get more stability into those yards and get them all to the point where they are capitalized to be able to operate at the pace we need them to operate with. without even a wartime scenario, just looking at the amount of ship repair work we're going to have to do, I mean, that is going to continue to accelerate at the same pace as we are in the shipbuilding. So one of the things we're going to do this year is a 30-year ship repair sustainment plan, so we can really look at where do we have any limitations in the system, whether that's capabilities like dry docks, are we maximizing use of all the capacity we have, and then are there things we could do better on the acquisition strategy side that would enable some more stability in those both public and private yards because they could stabilize their workforce. Our biggest challenge, facilities is a challenge. Our largest challenge is in the workforce and the business. And if we can't get stability, both in new construction and in repair, then we'll really struggle to attract the workforce and retain the workforce we need. Senator Kane had a great session down in the Norfolk area just on workforce. And if you look at the numbers that we have to hire, it's a pretty staggering number. Now, if we can get to a sustainable infrastructure, both on the public side and on the private side, that can handle that load, that gives a lot more flexibility to handle unplanned work and work that in.
Well,
right now, we're right along the edge. I'm sorry.
Tell us about that number, since we're talking about that. What information did Senator Kane elicit there about the staggering number?
So Senator Kane had a great session just between the public yards and the private yards and the local community. And I would say it's the same in all of our shipbuilding towns of how do we work together to attract, train, and retain the workforce, whether it's in the public yards or in the private yards, whether it's new build or repair. We've got to look at that in aggregate. And our biggest challenge in terms of achieving velocity is in workforce. I think over 50% right now, 56% in the public yards in terms of workforce have less than 5 years experience. So not only do we have to attract those workers and get them in the system, then we've got to figure out how to more effectively train them. I would say Portsmouth's leading the fleet in terms of some really progressive ways to rapidly train. The challenge is, circling all the way back to BCA, drastic cuts where we have to turn that whole pipeline off, to Admiral Merz's point. You don't just a year later turn that back on. That's a decade. You're going to create a decade problem that will cause another decade to turn around. And so my hope is, unless we address this growing need, we won't handle the current workload, much less emergent work that comes out of, heaven forbid, an accident or wartime repair.
I agree. Thank you.
Ma'am, I'll just pile on that. Hey, I have a lot of personal experience with Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. It's a very solid citizen as far as repairing our ships. On their behalf, I would tell you that McCain is a tough test case. She's not a typical repair. She's not a modification.
I was not suggesting that McCain was an issue for the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, but just that it reflects the challenge that we've got.
But McCain was somewhere between reconstruction, twisted steel. I mean, she was a mess, and she took a bit of work.
Thank you,
Senator Kane.
Well, if I could, I would just like to thank Secretary Gertz because he, at my invitation, came down and just to kind of share after we got the NDAA done and we had the commitment to 355 ships. I think everybody in my shipbuilding community was feeling great. I'm sure your communities were feeling the same way. But we kind of needed like a scared straight moment where these won't build themselves. And so we had the workforce needs of a 355 ship Navy, and we pulled together public and private shipyards, both the builders and repairers, and then all of the K-12 systems. There's probably about 10 jurisdictions with K-12 systems, community college 4 years, and Secretary Gertz and others came down and said, if we're going to do this, let me tell you what the need will be. The head of the Huntington English Shipyard said, wow, the shipbuilders that will be building these are in pre-K right now, but if we're not equipping them with the skills or having guidance counselors kind of position them in this direction, then we won't meet the challenge in Hampton Roads, and we might not meet the challenge as a nation. And
do you agree, Secretary, that around Senator Shaheen's shipyard it's really very, very cold there a lot of the time, and At Senator Kane's place, the traffic congestion is just awful trying to get to and from work. You don't have to answer that question.
Sure. My family's from Green Bay, so those are both very warm places.
Well, and I would just say it turned out to be just what my community needed. That June 8th symposium has generated a follow-on collaboration, and I'm attending the opening of a new technical institute connected to Tidewater Community College next Monday. Yeah, I think next Monday, where they will be training a lot of people in the trades that would be relevant to this. But I think the workforce needs are going to be massive. And to balance, the other thing I'll give Secretary Gertz real compliments on, the notion of a 30-year ship repair plan. It's one thing to do a 30-year shipbuilding plan. That's fantastic. But the notion of ship repair, which was quite affected by sequester, all the readiness stuff, we'll defer maintenance on this for a while. It really put the workforce in a position where they didn't know what was coming and when it would come and how would sequester affect them. The idea of trying to do a ship repair plan over the same time horizon you're doing new construction makes perfect sense, and that was also really music to the community's ears to hear a degree of foresight going into the repair side. I think all of our communities would benefit from that. Last thing I'll say, too, is I don't mean to throw a competitor into the mix, but I toured the Navy base in Rhoda on November the 9th, which was a Friday morning. And in Rhoda, a lot of American ship repairs done by Navantia. And the Navy leadership at the Rhoda base talked about, we see our ships repaired in public yards and by private shipyards in the United States and even by Navantia. And they were giving Navantia a lot of props and saying, hey, they built the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. They know what they're doing. So there's good ideas out there if you're trying to do a 30-year ship repair plan, and all the good ideas are not necessarily all ours, so we ought to be trying to take good ideas from wherever we can find them.
Yeah, absolutely, sure. And again, I think if we can clearly show that demand signal with some stability, then we'll get a number of players interested in that. Where we're doing a lot of work on our side is really looking at how we contract for those ship repairs and making improvements to that, both for a stability standpoint. We're already seeing some of our improvements having a drastic impact on reducing timeline and allowing more players to come in to create a competitive and capable field because, again, there's plenty of work coming. We've struggled a little bit over the last several years with the current amount of repairs. That's going to, as we talked about, that's going to continue to grow, so we've got to pay very close attention to that.
General Berger, thank you for listening to us for an hour. The minimum Navy requirement for amphibious ships is 38. Combatant commanders need more than 50 amphibious ships on a day-to-day basis. The current inventory includes only 32 amphibious ships with just 10 to 15 operationally available on a given day. What's being done to close this gap? And let me ask you about either a multi-year or a block buy of LPDs.
A couple parts of the answer to your question, Senator. First, the 38 ships, as you mentioned, is the agreed number based on a capacity to land 2 Marine Expeditionary Brigades. The National Defense Strategy requires us to compete and deter and then fight if we need to, which is why the combatant commanders, as you state, say it's higher than 38. And if it's not going to go any higher than that, then that means some risk somewhere in the globe that the Secretary and the Chairman have to balance. What we're doing to close it, what the Navy is doing to close it on the big decks is the next LHA, follow on to the American Tripoli, absolutely critical. And earlier is better from a Navy Marine Corps standpoint, because we need 12 big decks. They are an incredible platform, and anything we can do to move that, accelerate that is a good thing. On the smaller end, the LPD Flight 2s, which is a follow-on, of course, to the San Antonio class, absolutely brilliant use of a hull form that both of the Marine Corps and Navy are happy with, we're comfortable with, and taking advantage of that hull form to replace the LSDs, which are 35, 40 years old, absolutely critical.
Maybe, Mr. Secretary, on the Flight 2, does the Navy plan to buy one ship at a time or block buy? And is multi-year procurement an important tool in cutting costs and stabilizing supplier base? And does the Navy plan to use the $350 million to buy multiple sets of long lead time material?
So generically, we have used block buys and multi-years extremely effectively here with the support of the committee to both accelerate production and save costs. On DDG 51, we'll save $700 million on that multi-year. In terms of the LPD one, it's a little early right now, pre-decisional, in terms of what we'll do with that funding until we sort out our 20 budget. I'll be happy to come brief the committee once we get the 20 budget locked down, and we'll describe the strategy we have when we get the President's budget over here in February.
Okay. Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for being late. There's no effort around here to schedule hearings in any rational way. If you have a computer system that can do that, let us know. Admiral Mertz, the Zumwalt is being armed, if you will, combat system activation in San Diego. I guess my first question is, how's that going?
It's going well. As you know, we did a review of the complete requirements of the DDG 1000, the advanced weapon system, the advanced gun system, and then the combat system. And in the end, we decided to split the two programs.
Is your mic on?
Yes, sir, it is. I lean forward here.
Thank you.
We determined that the best future for that ship is to get it out there with the capability that it has and separate out the advanced gun system, leaving everything else in place. Very capable platform with or without that gun, and we'll be developing either the round that goes with that gun or what we're going to do with the space if we decide to remove that gun in the future. The rest of the ship is doing fine. It's still on track to be operational in 2021 to the fleet, and then in the ensuing cycle to get it on deployment thereafter.
And I understand it's basically been remissioned from land attack to strike, sea-based strike. Is that? Can you define that?
It's been remissioned to a strike platform, whether it's sea-based or sea targets or land targets. It can handle both, and that takes advantage of its tremendous arsenal of VLS cells. The other benefit of the Zumwalt class is those VLS cells are larger than any other surface ship VLS cell, so it opens up an aperture of more weapons options for that ship. So this was the thrust that drove us to, hey, let's get the ship out there. Let's not hold it back because of the projectile challenges, and it's a science and technology challenge. It's not an engineering problem. We just cannot get the thing to fly as far as we want. So we're going to continue to work on that and take advantage of the strike capabilities with the combat system of that ship.
If my next question is getting into a classified area, please tell me. Given the power capabilities of that ship, do we see this long-term as an opportunity for directed energy or other kinds of non-projectile or non-expensive projectile?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, we do. Before you arrived, I talked about how we are moving to an era of new ship adaptability. I would tell you Zumwalt is kind of the case study for that. She has the balance of what we call SWAP-C, the space, weight, power, and communications that allows us to expand this ship over time. So she is going to be a candidate for any advanced weapon system that we develop.
Particularly given the power generation capacity.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
General Berger, do you have any concerns about this remissioning? Does this undermine the land strike capacity that the Marines might have been counting on from this ship?
Senator, I don't think it replaces it at all. I think any forward commander is going to ask for all the capability he can have, and the Zumwalt adds to an arsenal that's already there. I don't look at it as a challenge or a competitor at all. It's if you were in PAC Fleet or at PACOM, this is more tools in your toolkit.
Secretary Gertz, talk about combatants, surface combatants. There's always a trade-off between industrial base and absolute lowest price. Describe you and Secretary Spencer's view of how do you make that trade-off to be sure that we're maintaining the industrial base that's necessary going forward?
Yes, sir. I mean, obviously, there are all things we consider as we look at different systems and look at the industrial base. We aim to put together strategies that enable us both to keep cost competitiveness as well as a predictable, stable industrial base. So I think as you saw me adjust, if I use an example, DG 51, we adjusted from what used to be kind of a pro-based approach to, okay, compete for quantity, but each will have enough quantity guaranteed to have a stable production line. And then over time, we'll compete those, so in our case, we didn't put the option ships into that 10 multi-year because depending on when the timing was, depending on the situation, we may make different choices on each of those option ships. So that was.
But is this kind of calculus going to be applied to the option ships?
Yeah, sir. We will always look at both pieces of that, and I have flexibility depending on the situation to make determinations along any of those lines.
Let me ask about the frigates. You've taken a different approach rather than a blank sheet of paper. I can't remember the term, parent craft, I think is the term. Do you anticipate significant savings from that approach? It makes sense to me. I'll preface the question, but.
Yes, sir. I think two things that are unique in that acquisition strategy that I think will bear fruit for us. One is specifying that we needed to have a parent design to then reduce the risk and the timeline associated with testing.
The timeline is very aggressive.
Right. Yes, sir. The second piece, which I think has been paying big dividends for us, is having an interactive and iterative requirements process. And so the CNO and I just slapped the table on the requirements for the frigate.
You've closed the door.
We've closed the door, but that was after almost a year of iterative conversation with all the industrial competitors where we looked at the cost, the risk, the schedule impacts of any of these potential requirements changes. So between the requirement side and the acquisition side, which included the industrial partners, we had a great back and forth dialogue so that everybody understood going into the competition exactly what was expected, and we understood with much more precision than we have in the past the cost and risk to any of our requirements so that we, in the end, created the best balance of affordability, achievability, and operational effectiveness. And that was a joint effort between the requirements and the acquisition side.
I compliment you on that. I think closing the door on the requirements at some point is one of the ways that we can defeat the problems of procurement and cost. How many of these is the bid going to be for? How many frigates?
So the initial bid will be for the lead ship and then 9 additional ships. So the first 10 of what's currently a requirement of 20, that requirement may get revisited over time.
And I understand that's a winner-take-all. Out of the 5 bidders, one yard is going to get all of that business.
That's the current acquisition approach, yes, sir.
Why that approach? I mean, you're having 5 yards, highly qualified, a lot of work, a lot of intellectual input. Why not some kind of division of that buy in order, again, to get back to the question we were discussing about industrial base?
Yes, sir. It's certainly a trade-off. I think the challenge is with the production rate that we currently have laid into the shipbuilding plan, one would have to really look hard is there enough work to sustain 2 yards in parallel with that? Now, obviously, if we revisit that production rate and production ramp, there are certainly opportunities to have more than 1 yard produced at. Part of our strategy will be to produce a data package that would allow, should we want to go down that path, additional producers of the ship. we'll have to balance that, so that will be a cost-effective.
Plus, for the second round, you would have additional competition. You could have additional competition plus industrial-based maintenance. I hope that's at least in the discussion.
Yes, sir. We'll continue to look at that as we go forward. Our current focus right now, and happy to report we're on track in terms of locking the requirements down. We'll have a draft RFP out this spring. We'll have a final RFP out by the end of this fiscal year, which will put us in conditions to effectively award that initial contract in October of 2020.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having this hearing, and thank you, each of you, for your service to our nation and for being here today. I was very pleased, Secretary Gertz and Admiral Mertz, to see in your written testimony that the Columbia-class program remains the Navy's #1 acquisition priority and is on track to start construction at the beginning of FY 2021. I assume you'd agree with me that it is vitally important that that program remain on track.
Yes, sir. That is my #1 priority.
And that's the reason that I champion an additional $237 million in this year's NDAA in advance procurement above the President's budget to address the long lead time that is required for this kind of program, adding capacity and capability to sufficiently prepare the submarine industrial base for that very substantial increase in work. You can't hire people necessary for that kind of program just by putting an ad in the newspaper, correct?
Yes, sir. The supplier base will be one of the pacing items for that program, particularly as we look at that program, 2 Virginias, and the Ford aircraft carrier. We're looking across that base all the time.
Would you support increased advanced procurement funding for that program?
Sir, I would say advanced procurement funding and anything we can do to help the supplier base will drastically reduce risk going forward. What we're seeing in most of our construction programs is a key risk is supplier fragility, either single sources or single producers where we have to ramp up production.
Thank you. I'm sure that you have read repeatedly and carefully the GAO report entitled Actions Needed to Address Costly Maintenance Delays Facing the Attack Submarine Fleet. I know Senator Shaheen asked you about maintenance issues, and others may have as well. The report concluded, quote, the Navy has not effectively allocated maintenance periods among the public and private shipyards to limit attack submarine idle time. As you're well aware, the GAO estimates that since FY 2008, 14 attack submarines have spent a combined 61 months, 1,891 days, idling while waiting to enter shipyards for maintenance. Meanwhile, Electric Boat, which has additional capacity to take on maintenance availabilities, is being underutilized, which harms our industrial base because it means that those idle workers will go elsewhere. In fact, without additional work, Electric Boat's workforce will decline just as it needs to ramp up the workforce for Columbia-class production. They need to hire an additional 15,000 new employees over the next 10 years. So we need action now to address the backlog that is bad for our national security and the harmful impact on our industrial base. We've been talking about this maintenance backlog for over a year with no clear solution in sight. When will the Navy release a plan to provide maintenance work to Electric Boat in order to help manage their workforce and the maintenance that needs to be done?
Yes, sir. I think, attack submarine availability is a critical issue for us, particularly as we have the bathtub approaching. And so it's one of the primary focuses for myself and Naval Sea Systems Command. Currently, we have 4 submarines in maintenance availabilities at combination of Electric Boat and Newport News. We are going to award at least 2 additional availabilities into the private yards to better balance that out. But going forward, under the new role this committee provided me to oversee sustainment readiness, that's really I'm really focusing on getting predictability and advanced planning in the readiness area for ship repair, with a particular focus on submarines. And not only look at making sure we've got the public and the private yard balance correct, but we do it in a predictable manner so that the private yards can facilitize and be prepared for it. Ideally, my hope would be that we would have an enduring capability at both the public yards and the private yards for submarine maintenance repair.
Can you tell us when you will be making those awards?
So the first 4 are currently underway. We will be, I believe, this summer releasing, the spring, summer, the RFPs for those next 2 maintenance availabilities. And then we're going to continue to look out over time. I can give you, if you like, take a question for the record on the exact timing of each one of those. But my strategic approach to this is balancing out that work and getting predictability into the maintenance planning so that we have capacity to get those ships both in and out of those availabilities on time to give the combatant commanders the capability they need.
And 2 of those awards will be for private and 2 for public? Is that the...
Of our upcoming availabilities, at least 2 of them will be to the private yards.
And will one of those yards be electric boat?
Yeah, we're still sorting out exactly our strategy, whether we're going to compete those 2 private availabilities or award those sole source.
And you would be able to provide more information in a question for the record?
Absolutely, sir.
Appreciate your
Absolutely.
responding in that way. As you know, often the cost is lower in private yards, like electric boat, than it is in the public yards. The GAO concluded that private shipyards were 24% less expensive from 2010 to 2017 for overhauling Los Angeles-class subs. Has that been your experience?
That hasn't been my experience per se, but I guess what I would say is not taking on which is cheaper than the other. Every one of them will benefit through better planning, more advanced planning, and having a strategy everybody can plan to and then execute, versus right now we have not provided the planning horizons, which then drives up the cost on either side.
I think that strategic change in direction will be welcome to everybody on this committee, because we're all concerned about the maintenance backlogs that have occurred, which pose a danger to our national security as well as our fiscal health. And I appreciate your providing any additional information.
Yes, sir. And we're going to absolutely need those private yards as we look to service life extend some of the Los Angeles class ones by recoring those. That will put additional pressure on the public yards. And so, again, my intent is to, with this 30-year ship repair plan, get more ahead, get ahead of these looming availabilities and repair cycles so that we can put the right strategy in place, which then enables us to more cost-effectively deliver those availabilities and get those ships back in the fleet.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
General Berger, let's talk ship to shore. Tell us how we're doing on the Marine Air Ground task forces, and with regard to the ship-to-shore maneuver and the vision for the future, what are our gaps and shortfalls?
Senator, the connectors that you spoke of, as important as they are right now, they're going to be more important in the future. In the peer competition world, which you alluded to in the beginning, the concept for the Navy's operations and the Marine Corps' naval force forward, we're going to be more distributed. The more distributed are, the more important connectors are. The LCACs we have right now that have been slept once already need to be replaced, and they are being replaced. They have to be. The LCUs that are 45, 50 years old have to also be replaced. Both are going to be critical to move the naval force, the Marine MAGTF, around the naval force, both from ship to shore to shore, and shore back to ship. So those two, the programs for the LCAC replacement and for the LCU replacement, absolutely essential.
Okay. Well, let me move to A2AD, General Berger, and Admiral, you may want to join in here. Much has been made of emerging anti-access and aerial denial, A2AD, capabilities of certain countries. To what extent are existing and emerging A2AD capabilities a concern for the amphibious assault?
I think the A2AD threat, which is well publicized, drives you towards a place where amphibious forces, the amphibious capability is even more important. And the reason for that is you're going to need, in a layered offense and defense, you're going to need forward forces, inside forces that are survivable and lethal both. So the ability to project power from a sea base, a sovereign ship, a platform from the sea, onto either an advanced naval base or to secure a commons area, a strait, for example, that might be contested. Any of those are possible missions that the maritime component commander might need to do. I mean, his job one is to keep the commons open for friendly use and perhaps deny them from a threat. So the ability to, if you did not have an amphibious force, said another way, Senator, if you lack that capability, then your only option is to bring it from some other land, some other place.
Are we talking, is our assumption 5 miles, 25 miles? What's the distance?
It's going to be completely threat dependent. It's going to be dependent on the operating environment that commander sees in front of him.
Admiral, you have anything to add?
I would only add that A2AD is one of those peer competitor capabilities, both ours and theirs, that we track closely. This would rapidly go to a higher classification, but it's probably less range dependent than sector dependent. It's kind of how we look at it. And the ability to operate in those environments creates, advantages and disadvantages depending on how you're outfitted to deal with it.
Senator King.
Thank you. We're doing multi-year procurement block buys for combatants, maintaining industrial base. Do we have a plan on recapitalizing the ready reserve force? We can have great combatants, but if we can't get the supply to them, that's a problem. Where does that stand?
I'll talk about it. I'll say generically, and then Admiral Mers can talk about it from a requirements standpoint. I would say yes. It's absolutely something we're going to have to work our way through in the coming years. Right now, we're looking at it in a combination of extending some service life extension of our current assets through the authorities given and through the committee, some potential procurement of some used assets, and then looking at a future ship common hull CHAMP program that could potentially provide some new build assets going into the future. And so we're looking at all three of those lines of operation. On CHAMP specifically, we're preparing by the end of the year to put an RFP out and bring on multiple potential builders to do similar to what we've done with frigate and get into an iterative requirements kind of solution space to try and lock down more of the specific requirements for that hull. Admiral Mers's team has been working on the requirements from a warfighting standpoint. This would enable us to do the same thing we did in frigate, bring in the industry team early and then get into some iterative design requirement trade-offs so that we could then set our final requirements for what a CHAMP program would look like in the out years.
This is sort of a parenthetical, but we go home and are asked to defend the defense budget and the costs. And one of the things that I've tried to get across is we're recapitalizing a lot of, the submarine is the biggest example, and in the nuclear area, it would be helpful, I think, if you guys could quantify that to some extent. In other words, what is ordinary cost of operations and what is recapitalization the Columbia class would be the prime example, because I think those are two different subjects that the public needs to understand, that we're, in a sense, paying bills that haven't been paid because some of these platforms are 40, 50 years old. In the Air Force, of course, we've got all kinds of situations where the planes are a lot older than the pilots. So that would be helpful. For the record, if you could give
Yes,
that
sir. I
some
would,
thought.
happy to both answer that and then and talk in those terms as we're going forward.
What is operation and maintenance versus what is recapitalization? A couple of other questions. On the cruiser, we're talking about the frigate. Are you thinking of following a similar program on the new cruiser, that it might be a pre-existing design and rather than a clean sheet of paper?
Yeah, sure. I think we're on the early end of defining all the parameters around that. Admiral Mers can talk from the requirements side. Their team has been working the initial requirements. We're starting to engage industry.
It just seems to me, to the extent that we have hull designs that we don't have to necessarily modify, that's much better for the taxpayers. It's faster. I hope that's in the.
Yeah, there's advantages to the degree that we have hulls that can meet the requirement.
Yes, sir. I mean, we were very pleased with how the frigate requirements definition phase went.
Can you come up a little closer?
That'll certainly.
That'll inform the process.
That'll certainly inform the large surface combatant process. Really just comes down to the swap C that we spoke about on the DDG 1000, whether or not in the requirements definition phase, on whether or not we can generate a hull that's going to give us enough volume to evolve over time.
I hope that one of the requirements for all these new platforms is that they be easily modifiable.
Sure. That is
a
driving
50-year hull, but you might have 10 years of software and then.
Sure. The way we say it is we can't help that we make great ships that are around for 50 years, but what we can help is the ability to evolve them very quickly. And this whole adaptability piece is a driving requirement.
I would think that would be a design criteria.
Yes, sure.
There was some testimony, there was a question in the full committee meeting this morning about the John S. McCain, and it's about to come back into service. It's taken a long time. Why did that take so long to get a ship? I mean, you could practically have built a new ship in a year plus that it took to repair that ship.
Yes, sir. And I think that points to our need for stable and predictable funding and programming that allows us then to build both the industrial base and the repair base that can handle the needs.
Was it a problem was there no place to fix it, or was just a yard that?
Well, I think it was I think some of those repairs are more complex than they first appear looking at them from the outside. Fitz has had some, it's a pretty tremendous job to repair some of it. There's some modernization that's also occurring ongoing with it. And then you've got to work it into a fairly constrained right now, either new build or repair yard workforce and capacity. And so my intent over time as we look at this 30-year ship repair plan and 30-year shipbuilding plan, if we can provide stability in those efforts, we can get the workforce and the capacity built up, which then would allow us more quickly to address emergent work than we currently have right now with if you look at the industrial base report we submitted to the President on the executive order, one of its findings was we do not have a lot of excess capacity either in new build or in repair. Right. And so when an emergent repair comes out that you weren't planning for, you don't have a lot of assets to immediately throw in that without having impacts down the road.
One follow-up question, if I might, Mr. Chair. A more general question is availability generally. I'd appreciate it if you could supply for the committee by class of ships what percentage of the fleet of that class is available at any given moment. In other words, is it 50%, 60, 70, 80? I don't know. I think it would be interesting to know and important to know, because if we're able to keep our ships in better repair, it can be a savings in the long run. You could end up with the same combat power for less dollars if we maintain and life extend. So I would just like to know fleet availability along the various types of ships? And any thoughts you have on?
Yes, sir. Happy to provide that for you, and we'll provide it by each class of ship. Obviously, a key
Do a comparison with the cruise lines ships.
Yes, sir. Lots of different.
Lots of differences.
Yeah, lots of differences, but there's certainly, one of the things we've been doing over the last year, both in, particularly in aviation readiness, is taking best lessons learned out of that and bringing them. We have relationships.
The private sector does a better job of their capital assets being online. I don't know, but it's an impression.
There's certainly opportunities to learn from all that. We have relationships with them. In fact, we've got a team that is going to go down and has a relationship with Carnival Cruise Lines to look at that very notion.
My question wasn't completely stupid.
No, sir, absolutely not.
I was worried.
We will take
put a
advantage of learning
percentage
for
on
everyone.
how stupid the question was.
Yes, that's right. I made a living asking.
Could I just add one thought? Because we talk about this all the time. The snapshot, whether it's aviation or ships that we provide to you, is going to be skewed because we deferred maintenance for years.
Yes.
So the snapshot will look we won't be happy with that snapshot because we knew when we ran those ships and planes hard for a decade, we knew we were going to pay a price on the backside.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just a follow-up, Mr. Secretary. Your written statement describes corrective measures being taken to address recent issues of welding quality and inadequate testing of missile tubes for the Columbia class. Can you provide your assessment of the root causes and program impact?
Yes, sir. The challenges we had with Columbia were on the missile tubes. We had similar issues on missile tubes on the Ohio program decades ago, so we had moved those missile tubes very early in the program to prove out the fabrication and welding of those assets. When we got into looking at the first set of tubes that were manufactured, there were issues with improper inspection of welds, which led to missile tubes that didn't fully meet all the specifications in terms of those weld designs. So that was an issue at a supplier. The supplier did not inspect properly the welds. Those then got shipped to the production facility.
What were the consequences to that supplier?
So that supplier is on a fixed price contract. So that supplier subcontract to EB. So that supplier now is repairing all of those missile tubes. Fortunately, we had programmed those missile tubes with a lot of margin in terms of our schedule. So we currently assess we still have 12 to 13 months of schedule margin, even with all of the missile tube repairs. And so we don't assess that will impact the Columbia build schedule, which is critical for us. But again, it's a very important issue. One of the issues that points to, and we've had a couple, we talked about the Collins shaft issue as well, is the criticality of the supply base. In the industrial base report, I think since 2000, it documented over 20,000, they call them establishments, that have disappeared from the shipbuilding industrial base, really pointing to that fragility in the supply base. And so that's one of the areas we're really focused on, ensuring, one, we've got suppliers that are building the quality products we need, and two, anywhere we have some of these single point suppliers, we try and build up their robustness.
You guys are in the building business and hardware business, not so much in the personnel business, except that you really are. What quality of young Americans are stepping forward now, General and Admiral? And we're asking them to handle some pretty state-of-the-art, sophisticated stuff. Am I correct?
Yes, sir. You're right. Our talent's eye-watering. And I do a lot of public speaking.
Eye-watering, yes.
Sure. And whenever the question comes up of the quality of American youth, I just simply say, come to sea with us and see them. Keeping them from getting bored is probably the biggest challenge. I mean, they are very active, they're very multitask, they grow up in an environment to communicate across multiple domains simultaneously. A long story I can tell you about my daughter that I use as an example, but they truly are just top shelf individuals. The challenge is it's, only 1% of Americans qualify to serve in the military. All services are competing for that talent. It's often the same talent pool that the engineering companies are competing for. So, attractive pay, benefits, the training, those are the things we continue to press forward to draw in the talent we need. It's an all-volunteer force, and that makes it a competition.
General, anything to add?
I think Secretary Gertz spoke earlier about not taking the industrial base for granted. He didn't say it in those words, but that was what he inferred, and I think you can say the same thing about the recruiting effort that the services have to do. That's an everyday, every hour of everyday effort. Because just like the Admiral said, there's a lot of competition out there for the same talent. I agree with him that the caliber of high school graduates and college students that come into the service, we've never seen anything at that level. But it's also something you can't take for granted. It's a everyday battle. And I think my personal experience, I won't speak for anyone else, my personal experience, the only time we're going to have to worry about that, really, is if they ever sense that the country is not behind them, is not supportive of them in some way, then we ought to be worried. But as long as that's the case, we'll find enough patriots, and they're very well qualified.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. We appreciate your service, and we appreciate your information to us today. And if there's nothing else, or there's some magic words I'm supposed to say? Oh, I'm going to, let me just add, Senator King is right about the scheduling. Secretary Orono, in spite of her best intentions, is not going to be able to make it to the hearing at all. I'll just submit my opening statement for the record. And do we need to leave some time open? Let's leave it open for a week for questions for the record. Anything else, Senator King? Thank you, sir. And thank you, gentlemen. This hearing is adjourned.